don't know where she is. I'd love to just know where she is or what happened. Or
Tom, however, to the dismay of many, he could be ruled out fairly quickly. Jill's phone had pinged at Hope Road, near the couple's apartment on Lux Street, before moving north along the Tullamarine Freeway at around 4:30 AM, before the signal cut out near Gisborne, a small town 33.5 miles northwest of Melbourne. That just happened to be right when Tom had been out searching for Jill around Sydney Road and had been caught clearly on CCTV. He simply couldn't have had anything to do with Jill's disappearance. By Monday morning, Jill had been missing for more than 48 hours, and apart from the general direction of where her mobile phone had gone, investigators had very little to go on. That is, until they got an unexpected 911 call from the public.
There's been a new development in the search for missing Melbourne woman Jill Ma.
Someone cutting through an alleyway to Hope Road had found a woman's handbag. A handbag with an ABC worker's ID card inside. Police responded and took Tom to check it out and see if he could identify any of the items. He quickly confirmed it belonged to Jill. A crime scene specialist brought in to help out with the scene analysis found several unsmoked cigarettes and a pencil with the ABC logo laying on the ground not far from where the handbag had been placed. Nearby, this specialist, he pointed to a flattened, darkened section of grass, and he said it looked like to him what he'd seen many times before, the scene of a sexual assault. Perhaps even more worrying, though, was the handbag appearing itself, because the morning of when the search immediately began, the police had searched that alleyway, and they were dead sure it had not been there, when they had looked previously. So where did it come from? Did the killer come back? Leave it back there? Was it like the BTK killer, do you want to play a game? Doing some kind of weird, sick shit? It was actually a lot more stupid than that, if you can believe it. It turned out that a local shopkeeper, on the Saturday morning, when they were opening up their business, had found Jill's handbag lying outside front and had, opened the shop, found a handbag, took it in, didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until the following Monday morning that this shopkeeper was on the phone to their daughter, who mentioned to them about Jill Marr disappearing in that exact area. And so, the shopkeeper got spooked and were like, oh, fuck. And so they just got the handbag out, went back to the alley where they found it, and were like, whoops.
That's really smart.
Just leave that there. Bad idea. Silly. Stupid even. Moronical. Even with the handbag discovery, the investigators, though, were still unsure of where Jill was and if she was alive. Suspicions of foul play were further aroused when on Tuesday morning, an employee of the Duchess Boutique, a bridal shop on Sydney Road, not far from the bar where Jill was last seen, handed over to police a CCTV recording from the Saturday night. CCTV captured a man in a blue hoodie and jeans pacing back and forth on Sydney Road. Minutes later, Jill, on her walk home, passed the shop and appeared to talk to the man in the hoodie. Detectives quickly made him the main suspect and target of the investigation and set about trying to identify the mystery man, at the same time debating whether or not to release the images to the public. They knew the likelihood of Jill being alive was slim. They also knew that if she was alive and being held somewhere, releasing the image could push them to harm her in order to cover their tracks. In the end, the decision was made to release the CCTV, along with an appeal to the public for any information that could help them find the man in the blue hoodie, as he quickly became known. I would have gone for the blue bastard, but to each to their own. It would be another video, though, in fact, that would provide clues as to Jill's whereabouts. See, when following the route Jill's phone had taken before the signal died, police found a worrying crossover. At the same time as cell phone data placed Jill's phone on the Tullamarine Freeway, a CityLink camera logged a car belonging to a man named Adrian Bailey travelling in the same direction. 41-year-old Adrian Bailey was already known to the police because he was a straight-up piece of shit. Bailey's long criminal history began at age 18 when, in 1991, he raped a 16-year-old friend of his sister. The next year, he attempted to assault a 17-year-old girl as she was walking home from a bus stop, getting arrested just over a week later when she managed to identify him to the police. Released on bail, he attempted yet another sexual assault, this time on a 16-year-old hitchhiker. He was determined. Now again, his victim managed to identify him and he was rearrested, and eventually he'd be jailed for 5 years with a minimum of 3 to be served. Wow, what a sentence. I'm sure he'll be rehabilitated after that. Oh wait, it gets even better when he would be released early after serving just a whopping 22 months. If that boggles your mind, then click, strap yourselves in. Over the span of less than a year, from September 2000, Bailey would commit a series of assaults in the St. Kilda area of Victoria. Each woman was driven to a secluded lane and attacked in his car. In April 2001, he was arrested and charged with 5 counts of rape. After pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 8 years. Bailey was eventually released after completing, a sex offender program, and then while out on parole, he just randomly bet the shit out of a guy outside a cafe. So he kind of back in, pal. He would plead guilty to that and be sentenced to a whopping 3 months. To which, he contested. He kind of would plead against as it being too harsh. No, my accent's getting better. Now investigators had this scumbag piece of shit's phone tracking the same route as missing Jill's. Detectives immediately put Bailey under surveillance and started to do their research on him, but one swift look at his background and they knew they needed to get him into custody as fast as possible. He had to be their man in the blue hoodie. Bailey was arrested by officers on the 27th of September, 5 days after Jill had last been seen.
First to the latest developments in the haunting disappearance of ABC staffer Jill Marr from the Melbourne suburb of Brunswick. Late today, nearly 6 days after she vanished, following a night out with friends, police arrested a man.
When asked if he had anything to do with Jill going missing, Bailey, played the helpful innocent, insisting he had nothing to do with it and he'd spent the night looking for his girlfriend after they had an argument. He said he spent the night looking for his girlfriend after they had an argument, and this is his literal quote. He was looking for his girlfriend because women shouldn't walk on their own, Unknown to Bailey, police were actually carrying out a search of his home during the preliminary stages of the interview and found a SIM card in his washing. It was Jill's SIM card. When confronted with the physical evidence, Bailey's story changed and he finally admitted that he was the guy in the blue hoodie. According to Bailey, he just fucking innocently approached Jill as she was walking home and just started yapping away to her, casual, friendly conversation by a complete stranger at about 1:30 a.m. Then he tried to touch her, he tried to give her a little smooch, and she became aggressive with him, if you can believe that. I think he was the victim here. This caused him to see red, and before he knew it, he had strangled her to death. He went on to claim, though, he instantly regretted it. He had never, intentionally went out to hurt anybody. It was a horrible mistake, yada yada, who fucking cares? You can read the rage-inducing transcripts of when he was telling this to the police. Take your heart medication before it because you will be pissed. It has quotes such as, let me just actually get my laptop here. She flipped me off and that made me angry because I was actually trying to do a nice thing. You know that? She looked distraught, She looked like she was lost. She didn't. And I don't know, man, always try to do the right thing most of the time, and I didn't take well to her response. This is literally the transcript, guys. He says, a lot. Don't know if you can see it, probably not, but he says it, trust me. I want to do the right thing, I don't care. I'm going to jail for a long time. I hope they bring back the death penalty before I get sentenced. Me too, pal. There's no explanation, and there's no excuses for this. Alright, for her family this week it must have been hell. You know what I mean? I need to be an actor. Now the detectives, they had a hunch. Maybe it's like a cop thing, a gut feeling really that maybe there's a little bit more to his story than he was letting on. And that maybe it didn't happen the way he was telling them. But more importantly, they had a confession to work from, and most of all, they needed to recover Jill's body. After a little persuading, Bailey revealed, though he couldn't tell them exactly where Jill's body was, he told them he was sure if they took him to the general area, he'd be able to point it out. So late that night, the detective drove Bailey out to Gisborne, the same Melbourne town where Jill's phone was last known to have travelled. After driving around for hours, and just as the detectives were beginning to lose hope, As they turned onto Blackwell Lane, Bailey suddenly raised his head and told the driver to pull over. When asked to show them exactly where they needed to look, Bailey refused and would only point to the place he'd buried Jill Maher's half-naked body in less than 40.
You have to be one sick motherfucker to even fuck with the dead body. I mean, not to mention how your body loses all, muscle tightness. Your muscles just become weak. It's no surprise the foul odors that come out, is your intestines, your stomach, your feces, you name it, just leaking out. And then depending on how they're killed, blood coming out, nose, mouth, ears. It's just, you have to be one kind of sick, deranged mother to follow through and do some shit like that. Hey, what is up, everybody? Sorry for getting on here a little late. I know out there in the East Coast it's 10:37? 8:37 here in Denver right now. Usually I like to hop on around 4, 5 o'clock or so, but my God, today has been busier than all busy. Running around, getting this, getting that. I was worse than, I don't want to sound misogynistic, but I was worse than a woman. Buying this, buying that, going to stores. I mean, I don't know what my problem was, but anyways, jump into that chapter. I noticed there was an episode that came out that I haven't quite watched yet. So I was hoping that you guys would just come along for the ride. My last two videos, I was shocked because the part 2 of what I was showcasing had views, but the part 1 didn't, and the part 1 establishes what had happened, and it is a gruesome case. For those of you who just stop by every now and then just to kind of get a different take or a reaction from a different YouTuber, feel free to leave a like, a comment, whether it's trolling or saying, yeah, I liked your videos or whatever, feel free to subscribe. I don't say that often, still feels weird saying it, but so close to breaking the 400 subscriber mark, which I want to do. Then little by little continue to grow this channel. And I promised my subscribers that come March, it's going to be a total revamp of this channel. So if you want to be a part of that, one thing I definitely like doing is I enjoy, giving away prizes, whether it be through some trivia, can you tell me where this particular lines came from, what movie was it from, and what actor said it, or music, or whatever. So far I've given away a Nighthawk, a brand new Nighthawk router, a Brio, 4K, 60 frames per second, or was it 120 frames per second? I can't remember quite, off the top of my head, but a webcam, let's see, a Nest Hub thermostat. So yeah, like I said, I don't know what it is. I feel like, I know some people go out there and buy bots, to flood their channel with what would seem to be fans. But, my thing is, if fans are loyal, I'm going to go out there and try to buy them something nice because they participated in something that I had put together. So without further ado, this guy, of course, needs no introduction. It's Mike from that chapter. Dude is freaking witty. If this is your first time on this channel or first time ever hearing of him, you're gonna fall instantly in love with him. When I was in a relationship with my girl, she would say, and I would say it too, I'm like, oh, there you are watching your little Irish boyfriend. And then she would come back and say the same stuff. So he's just funny. He has that witty personality that you take him to a bar with you and yeah, you couldn't outdo him. He's just a shit talker. And that's what I like about him. He doesn't hold back, but he does it in a tasteful manner because he's not being disrespectful towards the individuals that have, suffered at the hands of, some sick fucks. But, he is, he's a real deal. And like I keep on saying, I'm shocked that he doesn't have more than 2 million subscribers, and that newer YouTube's surpassed him. Newer YouTube channels have surpassed him, which is just mind-boggling. So, if you can, please go show him some love. I already know I'm gonna love the video, so I'm gonna like it right off the bat. And yeah, leave a tip. I joined his Patreon not too long ago. I just want to see the dude succeed. When you see a good, creator, you want to see them stick around. And mind you, I haven't been on here long, but I was extremely humbled when I got, Angels and Airwaves, Tom DeLonge from Blink-182, his new group, recommending my channel. I got Scary Pool Party people who've been on my channel know who he is. That's Alejandro Aranda, who came runner-up in American Idol 2019, where the judges were just swooning over him, and everybody thought, man, this is a conspiracy theory. How the hell could he have lost? But it couldn't have done better for his career than anything else. I mean, the dude has had a free reign, and it's awesome. So, anyways, without me talking, a couple things I want to let you know. I do keep the closed captions on. I had one of my subscribers reach out, and they are, a little hard of hearing, so the captions really do help. So I hope that doesn't bother you guys. I'm sure you can understand. This is a channel where, I don't put anybody down for anything. Only the assholes who deserve it. Like these fucking sick wacko killers, or people who are fucking trolls, which I can't stand. Yes, I have a little bit of a sailor's mouth on me, but I will never use it in a disrespectful manner towards you or towards a particular race or anything of that nature. So, again, without further ado, let's jump into this.
Isn't it?
I haven't seen this, but I'm going to call it. He does not seem like the type that did something to hurt her. I may be wrong. I never heard of this case before, but very recently, just pointing out the way that piece of living shit that I hope burns and rots in hell, Chris Watts, like, not even a shred of emotion. And oh my god, his acting, atrocious. Okay, I'm back, everybody. I'm sorry. Tonight's just been a total clusterfuck as far as trying to upload some stuff. But one thing that I am going to upload is Mr. Ballen. I haven't done one of his videos for quite some time. I don't know how many of you guys believe in the paranormal. If you guys just write it off as silly, to me at times too, when I really think about it, it's like, why the hell would I want to torment a family by making bangs on a door, or disembodied voice, or any of the shit that they catch? But it seems to be consistent across the board. Mr. Ballen, he said that he had an experience at his best friend's house, in their cabin, and of course I had made a video highlighting what had happened to me and my former best friend and my mom. And so naturally I'm inclined to believe, but I want to get your guys' thoughts. This whole week has kind of been a bummer because I've noticed that a lot of views have been dropping, a lot of subscribers, well, maybe like 4 or 5. So if the content isn't exactly reaching you, by all means, please let me know. Because one of my main goals is I definitely want to grow this channel before the movies that I started come out. I just kind of want to know, my core group of, subscribers, rather than being fandemonium, if that makes sense. A lot of fake people come out of the woodwork, and I've had two extraordinarily women that have just been so kind and sweet. And the same with some of the guys who have been so cool, so humble, that, you know, they go out of their way to say, you know, hey, have a Merry Christmas, have a wonderful New Year, may God bless you. And, you know, things like that matter a lot to me. It's all the little things. You know, like I said, I don't want to be famous. I don't care if people recognize me down the street. I just want to be able to support my family for the rest of my life by doing something that I enjoy doing. So with that being said, trying to grow this channel has been one of the hardest things that I've ever endured. After a year, I've gotten nearly, the most I gotten up to was 500, and then it started dropping again. And I know reaction channels as a whole, some of them could get quite big, but it's always looking for the next, you know, new fad, new viral. And, you know, if you're new to the channel, by all means, feel free to subscribe, to like, to comment. Even if you liked it or not, something that I could do differently, and I most certainly will. So this particular video by Mr. Ballen is entitled, A Forest So Evil, It Is Illegal to Enter. I know there's one in India that you have to get the government's permission, but I've never heard of it being illegal in other states, other continents, other countries. So let's see where he's going with this.
I have to start today's video with a disclaimer. Don't go to Dudleytown, Connecticut. This is not a prank, it's not a stunt, it's not clickbait, it's the truth. I'm confident that at the end of this video, there are going to be people that want to go. Don't do it. One, it's illegal to go to Dudleytown, it's private property. And two, as you'll see in today's video, there is a reason why people abandoned Dudleytown. It is not a safe place for people. But before we get into the story about Dudleytown, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button is playing an intense game of online FIFA, wait until they get the lead and then unplug their Wi-Fi. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. It was a bright summer day in 1906, and Dr. William C. Clark and his wife Harriet were driving slowly through a beautiful part of northwestern Connecticut called Litchfield County. Litchfield is a rural, very hilly area with lots of winding country roads, and the Clarks were there to try to scout out an area to build their second home. The couple lived full-time in New York City, where Dr. Clark was an oncologist, which is a cancer doctor, and he was also a professor at the Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons. And while the Clarks' lives were very exciting and fulfilling in the city, they were also very hectic and chaotic, and so the reason they had settled on Litchfield as the place to look for a location for their second home is because it was the total opposite of the city. It was quiet, it was peaceful, it was perfect. And so as this couple from New York City drove along these winding backcountry roads, they eventually reached this beautiful covered wooded bridge, and after they drove across it, they got this view up onto this mountainside off to their right, and high up on this mountain was this huge, shaded, beautiful forest. And they saw there was a road that appeared to kind of spider off and go into these woods. Now, the couple had no idea what was up there, but it was just so beautiful, and they were immediately so drawn to it that they decided they would go check it out and see if maybe there was a spot for their second home in these woods. And so Dr. Clark took the car and he went up this access road, and very quickly as they began climbing up this hillside, the road became very bumpy and overgrown. It was pretty obvious that not many cars were driving into these woods, and so before they even reached the tree line, Dr. Clark had to pull the car over and park it on the side of the road, and then he and Harriet got out, and then on foot they continued up towards the forest. And once the couple actually entered the forest, immediately the sunlight faded because the canopy over their heads was so thick, and the air became cool and refreshing. And after walking for only a couple of minutes, The forest, which at first seemed very still and quiet, suddenly became alive. They could hear birds chirping and animals running around and insects buzzing, and then up ahead they saw there was this field off to the side of the road that was full of all these wild apple trees growing in all different directions. And as they got closer, they saw there was just a deer right in the middle of the apple trees eating apples directly off the branches. And then, just past all these apple trees, the couple began passing these huge, beautiful patches of roses and lilacs and bright yellow bitter tansy flowers that lined the road. And then before long, the couple was stepping over these babbling brooks, and off in the distance they could hear the sound of running water like fresh spring water coming down off the mountain. And then, as the sun did begin to poke through the canopy above them, it almost looked like the forest was sparkling, literally. This forest was sitting on a hillside, and the hillside, which was made up of rock, had mica inside of it. And mica is a kind of mineral that when sunlight hits it, it almost looks like it's shimmering. And of course, there were the owls. As Dr. Clark and his wife walked farther and farther into this beautiful forest, they heard more and more owls hooting off in the distance. And to the Clarks, this made the forest feel enchanted. It was like the owls were personally greeting them. By the time the couple had turned around and begun heading back to their car, they had already made up their mind that they were going to build their second home in that forest. And so, after returning to their home in New York, they promptly put in the paperwork to purchase 1,000 acres inside of that Connecticut forest. And that forest had a name. It was called Dark Entry, and it was named that because it looked like from the outside, the forest was basically dark all the time. There was shade cast on it from mountains nearby, and then also the canopy inside of Dark Entry is exceptionally thick. At one time, there actually had been a town inside of Dark Entry Forest. However, all the people who had lived in that town were now all gone. The only remnants of this town were a couple of crumbling stone walls and a couple of home foundations that were scattered about the Dark Entry forest floor. The Clarks had seen some of these ruins as they walked along this overgrown path through the forest, but they weren't concerned. Instead, they felt like these ruins actually added some charm to the forest. After the land purchase was finalized, Dr. Clark began looking for local builders in Connecticut who could help him build this second home inside of Dark Entry Forest. But no matter how much money he offered these local Connecticut builders, they all said no. Now, none of them gave a straight answer to Dr. Clark about why they were turning him down, so Dr. Clark just kind of assumed that, hey, this project is not huge, it's just one house, and the forest is pretty isolated and hard to get to, and so he thought, probably these builders think it's not worth the effort. But Dr. Clark was not discouraged. He decided he would just build the house himself. After all, he was a very handy, competent guy who had grown up on a farm in New Jersey, and so he knew how to build things. And so, for the next several months, Dr. Clark would travel from New York City to Dark Entry Forest every weekend, and he would build this home. First, he cut down this massive swath of hemlock trees on this one flat patch of his land, and then with all this lumber he had cut down, he built his rustic two-story cabin on this flat part of his land. And then nearby on this hilltop, there was a freshwater spring at the top, and so he laid piping from the spring into his cabin so they could have fresh water. And then at the bottom of this nearby hill was this brook, and Dr. Clark loved just standing and watching this brook because inside of it were all these trout that would dart all around. And so Dr. Clark built a swimming pool with beautiful mossy embankments right up against this brook so he could sit there and watch the fish. By Thanksgiving of that year, the cabin was done, and so Dr. Clark and his wife Harriet, they stayed at the cabin to celebrate the holiday. And as they were sitting in their swimming pool watching the trout and listening to the owls hoot off in the distance, they both agreed that this second home was like their little piece of heaven. So every summer from there on out, and every major holiday that they could manage it, the Clarks would travel to their home in Dark Entry Forest, and they would swim and hike and relax, and they'd watch the leaves on the mountainside turn from green to bright yellows and oranges and reds. It was perfect. That is, until 1918. That summer, the couple was in their second home in the forest when Dr. Clark was suddenly called back to New York to attend to a medical emergency. Harriet was very upset at the prospect of suddenly being left alone in this cabin in the middle of the forest by herself for who knows how many days. And so when she dropped her husband off at the nearby train platform, she made him promise that he would come back soon, and he said he would. And then Dr. Clark got on the train, it took off, and Harriet just stood there with her arms crossed, watching it as it chugged along off into the distance. From his comfortable seat on that train, Dr. Clark had no idea that his wife was about to endure a nightmare while he was gone. We've all been there. Your chicken gulp. There is a comment and sign up. HelloFresh. When the Clarks bought their 1,000 acres in the Dark Entry Forest, they did virtually no research on the forest or the surrounding area. If they had, they very likely would not have purchased that land. You see, the town that used to be inside of the Dark Entry Forest, that was now just ruins that the Clarks saw when they first walked around inside of the forest, was abandoned for a very specific reason. It was cursed. At least that's what the locals say. And in fact, that was the reason why no builders in the area were willing to go with Dr. Clark into the forest to go build his house, because they were too scared to go anywhere near the ruins of this cursed town. This town, which was known as Dudleytown, was first settled sometime in the 1740s. At first, it was just a couple of people and a couple of small structures, but pretty quickly, 30 families had moved in and it was a thriving little town. But as the 1700s came to a close, terrible things began to happen to residents of this town. First, there was the Carter family. They moved to Dudleytown in 1759, and shortly after arriving there, 6 members of their family all died suddenly from cholera. The remaining branch of the Carter family was so grief-stricken from their losses that they left Dudleytown and went to New York, where they resettled. But almost immediately after getting set up there, Native Americans raided their property and massacred them, and the 3 people that survived this massacre were 3 of the kids, and they were all kidnapped and taken away. In 1792, a Dudley resident named Hollister died suddenly. Now, we don't know if he fell off a roof or if he was murdered, no one really knows, but what we can agree on is that his untimely death happened in the home of a man named Tanner. And Tanner, following Hollister's death, suddenly just began obsessively talking about these strange creatures he was seeing out in the woods at night, kind of roaming around the Dark Entry Forest. And he talked about it all the time and nobody listened to him. And eventually Tanner went insane and his daughter had to care for him for the rest of his life. And while Tanner was slowly losing his mind, his next door neighbor named Abel also began reporting that he was seeing weird creatures roaming around the tree line all around the town. And as Abel continued to report seeing these strange creatures lurking in the shadows, he too slowly went mad and had to be cared for until his death. In the early 1800s, a famous Revolutionary War hero, General Herman Swift, who lived in Dudleytown, lost his mind shortly after his wife was struck by lightning. And then in 1813, an unknown epidemic rolled through Dudleytown and killed many of its residents. After that, more and more residents of Dudleytown either died suddenly or died mysteriously, and also more and more residents began coming forward with stories about having seen these strange, shadowy creatures moving around the tree line at night. By about 1900, all the Dudleytown residents had either died or simply just left, abandoning their homes, except for one family, the Brophies. But in quick succession, the Brophy family's sheep all died, then the mother died of tuberculosis, then the 2 sons were accused of theft in a nearby town, and then they just disappeared, leaving one person, John Brophy, the father. But the Brophy family home burned to the ground, and so John, who was overcome with grief, just wandered off into the forest and was never heard from again. At that point, Dudleytown officially became a ghost town. No one lived there. And it was at that point, in 1906, when Dr. Clark and Harriet had their beautiful summer's day walk through the forest and discovered where they wanted to build their second home. So, fast forward back to 1918, and Dr. Clark, he's on his medical emergency leave to New York. It winds up being very quick. He's back on a train within 36 hours, and he pulls into the station right near Dark Entry Forest, and he's expecting to see Harriet waiting on the platform for him. But when the train rolled into the station, she wasn't there. Now, Dr. Clark was not a superstitious person, but for some reason, when he didn't see his wife there, he just felt like something was off. There's no reason she wouldn't have come out here to greet him. I mean, she was worried about being all alone in the cabin, and she knew he was going to be arriving at that moment. And so, feeling a little bit panicked, Dr. Clark left the train station and on foot made his way over to the Dark Entry Forest. And when he got there and began walking on that overgrown road path that led to his house, immediately, as soon as he was within the shade of the trees, he began hearing these owls hooting very loudly off in the distance. Now, normally, the sound of these owls hooting made him feel welcome, but this time he felt scared. He felt like something was wrong up ahead. And so he began jogging through the forest, and it's very dark, and all he can hear is the sound of these owls, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And then finally he reaches the clearing where his property is. And at this point, it's a cacophony of owls hooting practically right on top of him. And he looks up towards his house up on this hill, and he sees the front door is slightly open. And so now, with his heart racing, wondering what's going on with his wife, Dr. Clark runs up to his front porch. He gets to the door and he flings it open the rest of the way. And then right before he stepped into his house, this sudden high-pitched noise began up on the second floor inside of his house. And it was so startling to Dr. Clark that he just froze where he was. And so suddenly it's so loud from the owls all around him and the woods behind him and whatever this noise is that he just stood there unsure what to do. And so as he's sitting there getting the courage up to go investigate his house, he realizes what this high-pitched noise is. It's the sound of maniacal, insane laughter coming from the second floor. Sensing his wife had to be in danger, the doctor charged up the nearby steps up to the second floor, and he could tell this laughter, this high-pitched laughter, was coming from the master bedroom. And so he ran down the short hallway, he got in front of the closed door that led into the master bedroom, he slowly opened it up, and there, in the back corner of his room, was his wife. She was on the ground, rolled up in a ball, facing the door. Her hands were clenched in fists, her eyes were open and unblinking, and her mouth was open wider than was humanly possible. And as he's staring at his wife, wondering what's going on, he realizes this insane, high-pitched laughter is coming from his wife. But it doesn't even look like it's coming out of her. Her chest is just heaving, her mouth is staying open, and the laughter is just coming out of her. And so the doctor just stood there watching his wife, who's staring directly at his eyes. And finally, he just got so scared, he turned and he ran. During Dr. Clark's 36 hours he was away in New York, something happened to his wife. We don't know what it was, but it caused her to lose her mind. The only thing she would talk about was the strange creatures she saw out in the forest. By some accounts, Harriet spent the rest of her life in a mental asylum. By other accounts, she went back with Dr. Clark to New York, where she took her life. Today, Dudleytown is not only still abandoned, but it is also illegal to visit. However, people do still sneak into Dudleytown and walk around the ruins, and many of them have reported feeling these pockets of cold air where there shouldn't be cold air, and also some others have said as they've been walking, they've felt phantom hands slap them and push them. Some have said they've taken photographs inside of the Dark Entry Forest near Dudleytown, and they've captured strange, shadowy figures that they couldn't see with their naked eye. The famous paranormal couple, Ed and Lorraine Warren, shot a special series in the 1970s inside of the Dark Entry Forest, and they declared the area around Dudleytown was demonically possessed. So that's going to do it. If you got something out of this episode and you haven't done this already, the next time the like button is playing an intense game of online FIFA, wait until they take the lead and then unplug the Wi-Fi. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. We have a podcast called the Mr. Ballen Podcast that puts out brand new exclusive stories on Monday mornings, and on Thursday mornings we put out the remastered audio of our best YouTube videos.
I completely respect where he's gone with this channel. I mean, from a guy who went from just telling his Navy SEAL experiences all the way up to 7 million views in like a year is just insane. So, bravo to you, sir, because that is crazy. I'll go ahead and upload this. And there's one that I want to focus on, and this is the toxic woman. And this would be it. He's covered this before, but for those of you who aren't familiar, yeah, it is quite the story. So, yeah, I will be back shortly.